Welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living in the heart of Las Cruces, where your center is still alive and well in our hearts, and where our vision is a world in loving partnership for the good of all. I'm Barbara Reesner, your practitioner in service for this beautiful Independence Day weekend. We continue to have our Sunday services available to you on YouTube, so thank you for joining us. On the last Sunday of July, Rev Bonnie will respond to your questions during her traditional Q&A Sunday. So please send any questions you have regarding our center or our teaching to our office via email or give a call, and she will address them during that Sunday's service. The next board meeting will be Sunday, July 19th at 12:30. If you wish to attend the online meeting, please contact Board President Bob Greer or leave your name with the office to receive Zoom instructions on how to get onto that call. On our website, we also have online workshops and events that you might want to join. And we're so very grateful to those of you who are giving your tithes and offering over our website, or those who mail them in or just drop them in the slot through the back door of the center. We are a tithing community, and this month, 10% of all we receive for the month of July will be tithed to the veterans at the Community of Hope. They need the funding for the homeless veterans, both those on the street and those staying at the Community of Hope, as they need the help with transition the homeless into an apartment complex that has 22 units or to other rental places. Community of Hope is always working on homeless prevention. As your practitioner in service, I want to remind you that the practitioners are available to pray with you over the phone. And if you want a prayer from a practitioner, call the office and one of the practitioners will call you back. There's also a prayer request button on our website that can be used to send us your prayer requests. The confidential request goes directly to a practitioner. And we are still praying with you and for you from our homes as we Zoom together at our usual time on Tuesday afternoons. So now it is time for song, silence, and a prayer.
In this moment, I am one. Is this moment, This moment is what I am. In this moment, I am free. Is this moment free? This moment is what I am. In this moment, I am still. Is this moment still? This moment is what I am.
So in this moment, I give great thanks to live in such a beautiful country founded on the diverse expression of all of its people. And with this diversity, we learn to listen to, appreciate, and tolerate our differences and celebrate our similarities. I know and accept for myself and others that true spiritual expression is to acknowledge that we are all one, made of the same stardust, yet manifesting as individual expressions of our Creator. We give thanks to all who are giving of their time to our Center for Spiritual Living, and know that when we do come together again, it will be with a renewed and revitalized spirit. And so it is. The reading today is an oldie but goodie, written by Ernest Holmes himself and printed in the Science of Mind magazine from July 1953. Believing in the divine destiny of the United States of America and in the preservation of liberty, security, and self-expression for all, I offer this prayer for my country. I know that divine intelligence governs the destiny of the United States of America, directing the thought and the activity of all who guide its affairs. I know that success, prosperity, and happiness are the gifts of freedom and the divine heritage of everyone in this country, that they are now operating in the affairs of every individual in this country. I know that divine guidance enlightens the collective mind of the people of this country, causing it to know that economic security may come to all without the loss of either personal freedom or individual self-expression. I know that no one can believe or be led to believe that personal freedom must be surrendered in order to ensure economic security for all. The all-knowing mind contains the answer to every problem which confronts this country. I know that every leader in this country is now directed by this all-knowing mind and has the knowledge of a complete solution to every problem. Each is impelled to act upon this knowledge to the end that abundance, security, and peace shall come to all. And I know that this spiritual democracy shall endure, guaranteeing to everyone in this country personal liberty, happiness, and self-expression. Ernest was able to be a proud American while embracing the whole community and everyone in it. Here he uses an event in the life of Jesus to illustrate his belief in our connectedness as children of one spirit. It is related that while Jesus was talking, he was told that his mother and brethren waited to speak with him. But he answering said unto him that told him, "Who is my mother? And who are my brethren?" He then told them that whoever does the will of God is his mother, sister, and brother. We are not to suppose by this that he did not care for his earthly parents or friends. He was explaining that anyone who lives in harmony with the truth automatically becomes the brother, the sister, or the mother of all. This is a lesson in the brotherhood of man. God is the androgynous principle, the father and mother of all. Our earthly parents symbolize this heavenly parentage. Jesus was a consciously cosmic soul who recognized his unity with all. He knew that love must become universal before it can reach its maturity. I'm going to read that again. He knew that love must become universal before it can reach its maturity. Hence, he said that all who live in harmony with the truth are brothers in it. And so it is.
Do you ever feel like a plastic bag drifting through the wind, wanting to start again? Do you ever feel so paper thin, like a house of cards, one blow from caving in? Do you ever feel already buried deep, 6 feet under screens, but no one seems to hear a thing? Do you know that there's still a chance for you, 'cause there's a spark in you? You just gotta ignite the light and let it shine just on the night, like the 4th of July. 'Cause baby, you're a firework. Come on, show 'em what you're worth. Make 'em go, oh, 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 as you shoot across the sky. You don't have to feel like a waste of space. You're original, cannot be replaced. If you only knew what the future holds. After a hurricane comes a rainbow. Maybe a reason why all the doors are closed, so you could open one that leads you to the perfect road. And like a lightning bolt, your heart will grow, and when it's time you'll know you just gotta ignite the light and let it shine. Just on the night, like the 4th of July. Baby, you're a firework. Come on, show 'em what you're worth. Make 'em go, oh, 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 as you shoot across the sky. Baby, you're a firework. Come on, let your colors burst. Make 'em go, oh, oh, oh. You're gonna leave 'em all in awe, oh, oh. Boom, boom, boom. Even brighter than the moon, moon, moon. It's always been inside of you. Now it's time to see it through. 'Cause baby, you're a firework. Come on, show 'em what you're worth. Make 'em go, oh, 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 as you shoot across the sky. Baby, you're a firework. Come on, let your colors burst. Make 'em go, oh, oh, oh. You're gonna leave 'em all in awe, oh, oh. Baby, you're a firework. Come on, let your colors burst. Make 'em go, oh, oh, oh. You're gonna leave 'em all in awe, oh, oh.
Good morning. Once again, I want to thank you for joining us for this July 5th Sunday service, whatever time and day you choose to watch and join us. So, over the last 6 months, and especially in these last 2 weeks, the weight of being human has become really heavy for some of us. Our community lost our dear sweet Nancy Ritchie a few weeks ago. And 2 days later, my little baby Tara, my four-legged furry friend who had been by my side for 14 years, passed away. And then a week later, a good friend and a member at Wellspring, Kathleen King, passed away. After Tara passed, the grief weighed so heavily, I felt like I would never be able to stand here and speak to you about something uplifting again. My heart of compassion expanded for all of those who decide they need to numb these kinds of feelings in order to get through them. But with the support of my family and friends, and thankfully for my years of spiritual practice, and I mean practice, as well as an absence of sugar in my home, since that is my drug of choice, I was able to fully lean into my other tools that I have in order to get through this experience. I knew I had to go through it full on. It was here, it was in front of me, it was mine. I had to walk through it. And gratefully, I had the freedom and the support to have several days to spend by myself, just going through and exercising what I could with my spiritual tools and doing this work. Having presided over several memorials throughout the last years, Ernest Holmes' words that I often read during a memorial kept running through my head. It is human to grieve over the loss of dear ones. And as I felt that overwhelming feeling of being human just kept coming through me, and I just felt like this human experience sometimes is quite challenging. As a country, we have been grieving over the loss of loved ones due to this virus. We've been grieving over the loss of loved ones due to the violence of racism over many hundreds of years. We've been grieving over the loss of the loved ones that have served in the lines of duty, whether they've served as officers on our streets or as first responders to things like the fires, and as those who have served in our militaries. We've also been grieving over the loss of friends, family, and our loving companions in the animal form who have passed from other means over this last several 6 months. So our country and the world is experiencing a huge collective sense of grief, that deeply human experience that is just wrenching with your heart opening when you go through that level of grief. So I looked again at the passage that was going through my head, and the entire passage, Ernest Holmes said, "It is human to grieve over the loss of dear ones. We love them and cannot help missing them. But a true realization of the immortality and continuity of the individual soul will rob our grief of hopelessness." With all this loss and all of the things we've been experiencing here lately, sometimes it feels hard not to slip into that hopelessness. But thankfully, I had friends and family who kept tossing me ropes of hope, reminding me of spiritual truths, reminding me of a higher level of understanding, and reassuring me that even if in this moment I couldn't see a higher truth, once I got through my grief, I would be able to understand at a better level. My aunt, who is the daughter of a Christian Zionist, my grandmother, told me that her mother would say when she didn't feel well, "I'm going to go lay low and think high." It was my grandmother's way of saying, "I'm going to go lay down and do a spiritual mind treatment." So my aunt encouraged me to lay low, but think high. And the next day, as I buried my little Tara with some friends, during that time, we did a ceremony, and a hawk flew up out of the backyard and circled over top of us and screeched. We all saw it, and we were just amazed. And for me, it was a sign, because when my mother passed in 2009, ever since then, anytime I've wanted to speak to her, confide in her, cry on her shoulder, a hawk has appeared and circled out overhead. The next day, when I went out to weed around the gravesite, the hawk again circled and screeched over my head. So I decided to look at what did hawk medicine mean? What was it saying to me? And this is an abbreviation of what I read. The hawk medicine teaches you to be observant. Life is sending you signals. Life is the initiation. The hawk is bringing a clue about the magic of life. The magic can imbue you with the power to overcome a currently stressful or difficult situation. The hawk's cry signals the need for the beholder to heighten awareness and to receive its messages. The idea of the hawk is to see from the hawk's perspective, a higher perspective, one with a wider perspective. And so once again, that idea of laying low but thinking high was reinforced by this hawk circling overhead. So as painful as it was to admit, there was Spirit in the midst of my grief, sending me signs, sending me messages. And it was hard to totally slip into that hopelessness because there was Spirit right there in the midst of it. So I continued to allow myself to lay low, to cry, to journal, but also to bring my thoughts to that higher level. And once I reached a few days in, I started doing what I do when I get chaotic inside. I start straightening up and cleaning my house on the outside. And as I was doing that, out of a pile of papers, a little book fell out. The book is called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And it's by Kamil Ravikant, and I put the butterfly there. This little book is direct, it's short, it's to the point, and it was the exact medicine I needed in that moment. He starts off by talking about how he came to realize how important it is to love himself. Because he said, when we practice other things, he said, you go to the gym once and consider yourself done. You don't do that. You practice. He said, same here. Meditation is a practice. Working out is a practice. And loving yourself, perhaps the most important of all, is a practice. He said, the truth is to love yourself with the same intensity you would to pull yourself up as if you were hanging off a cliff by your fingernails. And further on, he explains why he came to this, that he had reached a place of being so depressed and so sad, and he was also ill, dealing with an illness, that he said he just didn't want to deal with life anymore. And he said, in that desperation, I climbed out of bed, staggered over to my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote this. This day, I vow to myself to love myself, to treat myself as someone I truly love deeply. In my thoughts, my actions, the choices I make, the experiences I have, each moment I am conscious, I make the decision, I love myself. And then the rest of the book explains how he put that thought into practice with a mantra and with meditation. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. 2 weeks ago, I spoke about the story of Narcissus and how he'd looked into a pool and fallen in love with a false reflection of who he was. But he'd fallen in love with himself. And so I'm thinking, well, now I'm being told to love myself. And back then I was kind of saying maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. So I kept reading through this and reading through Ernest Holmes. And in the Ernest Holmes text, I read, and this is the story where he's explaining the metaphysical interpretation of when Jesus spoke to a man and said, take up your bed and walk. And he said, would Jesus have forgiven that man if he had thought that God held anything against him? Certainly not. He knew that the eternal heart is one of love, and that God forgives from the foundation of the universe. Indeed, he knew that the divine mind is too pure to behold evil and knows nothing about sin. And so as I read Ernest Holmes and I read through this little book, I started to realize a continued interpretation of that myth of Narcissus. Narcissus had fallen in love with what I said was a false reflection. What was reflected back to him was more youthful than he actually was, and more perfect. Essentially, he fell in love with what he wanted to be, the perception he wanted to put out into the world. And what I was getting from Ernest Holmes and from this little book is that we need to love ourselves as we are. We need to love ourselves with our faults, our mistakes, our not-so-youthfulness, our sometimes forgetfulness, and the parts of ourselves that we want to keep hidden. That the truth of me is what I need to love, not a false reflection of who I am. And as I thought about that, I thought, how would it feel to love myself like that? I'm not sure that I do, and I'm not sure I would know what that feels like. And then I pictured my little Tara and how she looks at me, or did. And I realized that was God looking through her eyes at me so adoringly. She would look at me like I could do no wrong, like I was something even better than a slice of cheese, which was her favorite thing. So I realized I needed to feel that kind of love for myself. I needed to love, as we say, the warts and all. So this little book helped me to move through that process. He suggests starting your day and even ending your day with a meditation. And that meditation is to sit there and give yourself 5 to 7 minutes, breathing in, I love myself, and breathing out whatever comes up. If you argue with yourself about whether you do or not, breathe it out. Any negativity, any sadness, any grief, any anger, any frustration, breathe it out. So you breathe in, I love myself, and you breathe out whatever other stuff comes out, and do that for 5 to 7 minutes once or twice a day. Then he said, take that mantra, I love myself, and carry it through the day. He started while he was still lying in bed, just saying, I love myself, I love myself. Then he would say it to himself as he took a shower, and while he was brushing his teeth, and while he ate his breakfast. He kept that mantra going for days. And he said what he realized is that things shook loose and got healed just by saying that mantra to himself. And so I thought, what did I have to lose? I would start doing that. And as the pain would well up, the frustration, whatever, I would just tell myself, I love myself, I love myself. As I fixed food for the other dogs, I would remind myself, I love myself. Ravikant points out that you can't fight negativity or sadness, the old tapes, anger, even fear or sickness. We know that what you resist persists, and he was basically saying the same thing. But he also was saying you can lay down a new path. You can lay down a new way of thinking. And the way he was laying down that new path was saying, I love myself over and over. And as Ernest Holmes says, love heals all wounds. And so I realized that part of the healing process was to allow the pain, to see it, to let it come up, and still love myself through it by repeating that over and over. And I realized also that this is true for the larger community that's healing, as well as the individual. As a community, we've started reading White Fragility, and people have been speaking to the fact that they start to feel guilty or sad, and some even feel angry at our collective past, at our collective complacency regarding racism, and even the pieces of it that we have been unaware of, and how we have systematically harmed others, sometimes inadvertently and other times purposely. People are expressing their anger and sadness at how we failed to stand for our convictions regarding our belief in oneness, ways that we remain silent when we could have spoken up, ways that we've contributed to that collective, systemic, societal mistake or missing the mark, or that's the interpretation of the word sin, missing the mark. And so what I realized is that the importance of all this coming up is so it can be revealed, so it can be healed. And that in order to heal, we must love ourselves through this process. Allowing our pain or anger or shame or guilt in whatever area of our life to spew over others, especially other communities that we might be wanting to get to know or connect with, doesn't help the healing process. We need to lay low and think high. And my little book reminded me that the more we love ourselves, the more love we bring into the world and the less damage we inflict on others and the world. So I hope you'll join me in this self-love mantra and that meditation. Just take that time to breathe in and breathe out, I love myself, and keep it going. That is a way to help stop this cycle of pain. Another tool that he gave in this book is he said, if you start to feel the darkness overwhelming you and you can't see the light, he said, imagine yourself standing at a window and you take up a rag and you start wiping a little circle. The window is covered with soot or whatever is causing you to not be able to see the light. It could be clouded with grief or pain or old beliefs or self-condemnation. So there's that symbolism again of looking through the glass darkly. And he said, take that cloth and just keep wiping. Allow a little bit of light to come through, and then wipe the circle bigger and bigger till more and more light comes through that window in your mind's eye. Ernest Holmes on page 417 said, to assert our individuality is to rise above the law of averages into that more highly specialized use of the law which brings freedom rather than bondage, joy in the place of grief, wholeness instead of sickness. We cannot do this unless we are first willing to judge not according to appearances. In this judging not according to appearances, we are impressing the law with a new idea of ourselves, a less limited idea, and we are learning to think independently of existing circumstances. This is what it means by entering the absolute. And absolute is a capital A. So again, the idea is as we need to lay low, that's okay, but we think high. We allow ourselves to clear that judgment, the appearances, the negativity, and let that light of truth shine through the window. So after about 4 days after my Tara passed and 6 days after Nancy passed, I decided I should thank Lillian for this little book, since she's the one who gave it to me. And she texted back and she said, "I am prompted to suggest that this might be a good time for the Candlemaker's Son." Well, at first I was like, oh my goodness, because the Candlemaker's Son is this thick. It is this big book that she had given me a while back, and I had started to work my way through it. There was a paper in here, so I knew I had started my way through the book. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not sure I'm ready to try and tackle this. So I looked at the table of contents, and there was a chapter called Life Cannot Die. So I read that chapter, and it's how the author got through the passing of his father and how he was able to stand there and see his father's body, but see past that to the fact that his father's real living self continued on, and it was just the form that had died. There was another chapter called Love Me, But Never Leave Me, and I read that. And then I decided to look at where I had gotten to and why this little paper was in the book. And when I did this, I had quite a surprise. First of all, the chapter, Freedom is Found. And in there was a picture of my little dog that I moved to Las Cruces with. And it was taken during Pride Month in 2008 when we had a tent at the Pride celebration and we were giving out free hugs, and Crystal's sitting under the sign that says free hugs. This picture brought me so many different messages. First of all, I couldn't believe it was in the book. Second, it was like she was saying to me, see, you've survived the loss of a loving pet in the past and you've made it through. And it was like she was saying, even though you can't get hugs today, I'm here giving you a virtual hug over the many years since it's been her passing. And I felt like I remembered all the hugs that we were able to give and how people appreciated them during that time. And it was also June and Pride, and that's when I found this picture. So there was a lot that came along with finding that in the book. So there I was, laughing and crying at the same time after I found that. How did that picture end up in that book? Why was Lillian compelled to tell me to go seek that book out? To me, that's the mystery of spirit showing up in the midst of our human experiences. So later that day, I called my brother and sister-in-law to let them know what had happened. And my brother shared with me that as a physician, it took him several years as a young physician to get over any time he would lose a patient. He said he would spend 3 or 4 days going over everything he did, questioning himself, making sure he'd done everything as much as he could, and he would really agonize for several days. And he said, I had to find another way of thinking about it in order to do my career. And he said what he finally realized is that there is mine to do, theirs to do, and God's to do. And he said that every time someone passed, that was God's calling, that was God's to do. He said there were times he had made mistakes as a young physician, and he'd go in and his patient would be fine and smiling and would leave the hospital. There were other times when he'd done everything by the book, exactly as he was supposed to, and the patient would die. And he finally realized that that final transition is God's time. And he could only do what he could do and let them do what they could do. So this month's topic, Spiritually Cut Loose, Free at Last, has taken on a whole different meaning to me now than I had expected it would have when I put these topics together last November and December. Little did we know what we were going to be experiencing in 2020. Little did we know how many humans and our four-legged and other friends were going to be leaving the planet spiritually cut loose and free in a way that we just had no idea was going to happen. I had envisioned focusing on our freedom to worship, our freedom to gather and come together, our freedoms afforded to us in this country. And what's been coming up instead is we are seeing where our freedoms have not been afforded to everyone equally. And that's being revealed so it can be healed as we move forward. And it has been made very clear to me that those of us that are still here in human form, we are being called to think high. We are being called to a greater spiritual freedom for ourselves and for others. and that this is basically attainable through loving ourselves through all of who we are and all of our experiences. All the warts, the craziness, the foibles, the mistakes, the atrocities, the shame, the guilt, the fear, and the anger. Those things are the things that cause us to feel and believe that we're separate from each other and from our God. And we are not separate, and that's why they're being brought up to be healed. Another lifeline that was thrown out to me by Reverend Tanya was Marianne Williamson's book, Everyday Grace, Having Hope, Finding Forgiveness, and Making Miracles. And in the front of this book is a quote by Albert Einstein. A human being is a part of the whole called the universe, a part limited in time and space. We experience ourselves, our thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in all its beauty. Nobody is able to achieve this completely, but the striving for such achievement is in itself part of the liberation, a foundation for inner security. Again, that's Albert Einstein. So as I read that, again, I realized and felt that that sense of separation is being brought up and revealed so we can heal it. And anytime we experience that feeling, we need to continue to love ourselves and allow that love to heal all of these wounds, anything that's taking place in our lives. Another thing that my brother told me is that it's times like these when our friends carry us. And you've heard it said that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, over the last couple of weeks, I have come to the conclusion that it takes a village to be totally and completely spiritually free. It takes a village for us to truly heal. And it takes a village for our society to heal from its societal wounds, as well as our individual wounds. As a village, we are grappling with the systemic racism, and we're healing through those pains. And it was my village who helped carry me through the grief of this experience. So I am committed to continuing that healing work through love of self and love of others. For those of us who remain, our job is to keep clearing that glass, letting in the light, removing all obstacles to self-love and love for others. It is our job to lay low and think high, to release old thoughts and beliefs as needed, and to release our loved ones when they're called back to God. Since we haven't been able to gather over the last 6 months, I wanted to close by honoring those who we know in our community who have passed: Joanne Jonas, our sweet Nancy Ritchie, Kathleen King, and other friends and family who have gone before us. And since my sweet Tara is now soaring high with the eagles, I thought I would read these words that I normally read at a memorial service. So take them in. If you'd like to close your eyes and just listen to these words, this is going to be like a prayer as we close the service. It is human to grieve over the loss of dear ones. We love them and cannot help missing them. But a true realization of the immortality and continuity of the individual soul will rob our grief of hopelessness. We shall realize that they are in God's keeping and they are safe. We shall know that loving friends have met them and that their life still flows on with the currents of eternity. We shall feel that we have not lost them, they have only gone before. So we shall view eternity from a higher standpoint as a continuity of time, forever and ever expanding until time as we experience it shall be no more. Realizing this, we shall see in everyone a budding genius, a becoming God, an unfolding soul, an eternal destiny. Time heals all wounds, adjusts conditions, explains facts, and time alone satisfies the expanding soul, reconciling the visible with the invisible. We are born of an eternal day, and the spiritual sun shall never set upon the glory of the soul, for it is the coming forth of God into self-expression. And he ends the chapter by saying this, "And so we prepare not to die, but to live. The thought of death should slip from our consciousness altogether. And when this great event of the soul takes place, it should be beautiful, sublime, a glorious experience. As the eagle, freed from its cage, soars to its native heights, so the soul, freed from the home of heavy flesh, will rise and return again to its original home, naked and unafraid. When death shall come, and the spirit freed shall mount the air, and wander afar in that great nowhere, it shall go as it came, freed from sorrow, sin, and shame, and naked and bare through the upper air shall go alone to that great nowhere. Hinder not its onward way, grieve not o'er its form of clay, for the spirit freed now from clod shall go alone to meet its God." So as we heal all the dark aspects of ourselves and our society, whether it's racism, self-hate, guilt, shame, self-condemnation, may we do so by loving ourselves. May you experience the freedom of the Spirit as you allow yourself greater self-love. And may we all, as a whole global community, someday all humans say together the words that Martin Luther King made famous so many years ago in his I Have a Dream speech. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last. And so it is. So I want to thank you once again for joining us on this virtual Sunday service. Please stay safe. I hope and pray that you find ways to deepen in your self-love and to allow that to heal you and heal our greater community. Again, stay safe, stay well. I love you all.